So me and Mr. Assassinathan have been talking about this off and on for the last like 2 to 3 years, about our opinions on like emulated games and reproduction consoles and how we feel about it personally, and emulators in general. And so we figured we'd talk about it on stream because we can both bullshit our way through it pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we could talk probably for hours, and then fucking Solstice will get mad at us, and
Yep.
then we'll get in trouble.
Thank you very much for the host, brother.
Thank you.
But yeah, as always, I am Dewdney, aka Dustin, joined by my host.
I'm Nathan, or Assassinathan, or the Assassinathan, or if you were following me years ago, the Judge, or if you found my old YouTube channel, Fats and Mace, or Tard Muffin, or Randolph 802. I don't know. Could be any of these. But I'm here.
But yes, that is totally off topic from what we're here to talk about today.
Wow, surprise.
Tangents. Hello, this is what we're good at. We are going to talk about our thoughts on emulators, emulation in general, ROMs, and how we feel about ROMs, especially for the use on like recorded video and streamed video and stuff like that, and reproduction cartridges. Thank you very much for the host, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, isn't it? At least for me, I find it very. I think most people I know are fall into the same camp, but I can kind of see the negatives and positives for it.
I do see on one hand how people could consider it quote unquote theft.
Yes.
Because technically you are ripping the copy of the game onto your computer, and the problem is I don't think even the company sees that as anything wrong, because you bought the game, you own the license to it.
Yes.
Single use license.
That's right.
When you share it on the internet.
That's right. That's when it becomes a problem, because I actually have a Retrode or something like that rips ROMs.
Yeah.
And for my personal use, it's great. I can be like, okay, well, I don't need to bring my Super Nintendo into my office all the time. I can just be like, boom, I've got this USB thing. And it even lets you like open the ROMs directly and then throw them into an emulator. So you don't even have to rip them. You can just be like, oh, I'm playing this on my PC now, which is great. But yeah, like you said, the real issue comes when you start sharing that.
Yes.
Putting it up on the internet for everyone to get. So a Super Nintendo cartridge or an old cartridge-based system has a ROM, and that's where all the data basically exists in this package that the console can then read.
Yeah, so there's if you actually open up a Super Nintendo chip, there's 3 chips on the board. One of which I'm sure Nathan should have it. So there's your RAM chip, there's your ROM chip, which is the game.
Wrong one. Keep going.
And then there's a driver chip. Plus there's a save battery usually, which is just like a CR2032 or whatever, soldered onto the board. But so on that game chip, that ROM chip, that's what holds the actual game information. And you can actually take that chip, and emulators will run that ROM file so that pretty much reproduces what the console used to produce, which inside of the console, there's a chip on the board that reads that ROM file, turns it into a video image, pretty much. If you were to break it down.
So I just opened, and this is a repro cart, but and I don't know if this is to circumvent a lockout chip, perhaps.
That's exactly what that is.
Yeah,
for.
That's what I think that's exactly for. So this is like a fan ROM game, which I wanted to talk about at some point when we get into it. But yeah, so essentially, like Dewdney was saying, there's 3 chips on here. You can kind of see them, one there, and there. And one, probably this big one, I would think. I don't know. But yeah, like he was saying, one of them contains all the pertinent data that the console can then read.
Yeah, so then an emulator takes that data and pretty much turns it into the video signal that the Super Nintendo or NES or any other cartridge-based game would turn it into, and remake that file as a video file that you can play on your computer, and or onto a Retron 5 or anything like that. EverDrive, all those things run on a ROM-based system. So, yeah. And again, I'm in the same camp as Nathan, where I don't really see a problem with ROMs as long as you're only using them for personal use. It's different when you're ripping the games and selling it on the internet. It's like going to the movie theater and recording a movie with a hand cam and uploading it to torrent, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
Like
it's a lot like that, isn't it? And the efficacy of it comes in. You're sharing it around, which is a problem. A lot of people haven't paid for the games or whatever. But how are people going to pay for a lot of these games nowadays, right? Like,
yeah,
there's so many games on old systems that have never seen remakes, that have never been released in collections, um, and that people want to play. And it's like, do I have to spend, the hundreds of dollars to get a working Super Nintendo or whatever console? Super Nintendo's my go-to.
yeah,
And then find the game, which can run you anywhere, if you're lucky, between like $10 on the cheapest mass-produced garbage sports games
yeah.
to 250 plus. Like, I want to play Harvest Moon, the original one on SNES, and it's like, oh no, I have to pay an extra $100 for that, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
like a lot of those games, like, okay, the original, we'll talk, and I'm bringing it to Final Fantasy because a lot of the Final Fantasy games have been remade.
yes,
Final Fantasy 4, aka Final Fantasy 2 in North America, they did remake it on the DS and I think for the Wii, I
PSP.
think PSP, yeah.
Yes. Oh my
But
god, it's so good on PSP.
the DS version was nothing like actual Final Fantasy 2. It had these chibi characters and they changed the combat system and tried to make it 3D, and it kind of ruined the experience of the game. And I would much rather not have to pay $120 for a cartridge and be able to grab that ROM and be like, okay, I'm going to sit down on my computer and play this game from my childhood that I love so much. I would like to be able to record that and share it. And the problem is, unless so here's the thing about Twitch and or YouTube and or anything that you can share your gameplay on. If you were asked if you can if you are asked if and you cannot prove that you own the rights to that game, technically you're in theft by playing an emulation copy of it, which is crazy. It's you're not the one that stole, and I should be allowed to share my experience with this game, but all of a sudden I'm the bad guy because I own a quote unquote illegal copy of a video game.
Yeah, it's crazy. It doesn't make I don't the law's really weird around it, and I'm sure it differs between Canada and the States too. But back onto the actual topic, yeah, it's an odd feeling when you're just like, man, I just want to play this game. And it probably isn't as big a deal for smaller channels like Bit Battle Brothers if we were to play a ROM. We've never played a ROM. Just to put that out there, we have never played a ROM on Bit Battle Brothers.
Yep.
But if, my 40 at max views I get on a video aren't going to pull in any sort of money. So me playing that game, probably not as big a deal as, say, like Markiplier playing a ROM. And
Yeah.
if he makes, $10,000 off this video he filmed of Final Fantasy IV, someone might come and go, "Hey, do you own the rights to show that?" Right?
I
Yeah.
think Canada, yeah, that's how I think that's how it stands as well, Baker. But um it is
We
very
aren't
much like,
we aren't lawyers.
yeah, no, not at all. Don't take anything I say as law advice,
Yes.
please.
No,
'Cause you'll probably end up in a lot of trouble. I know there's been cases as far as like, I'm not sure how far back I've been dabbling in ROMs since I would say the mid 2000s, 2004, 2005, somewhere in that area. I discovered that I could play my old Super Nintendo games on a computer, and it was so good with ZSNES on fucking Windows 98. Like, shit computer could run my Super Nintendo games.
Dude,
So
yeah, my dad, he showed me that. He's like, "Hey, check this out." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "This is called an emulator." I'm like, "All right." He's like, "What game do you want?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Super Nintendo game, I don't know, Mega Man X." He's like, "Here you go." And I'm like, "Oh shit, like I'm playing Mega Man X on my PC."
yeah,
And like we had to go out and like buy a USB controller and shit, like and then
yeah,
one day he was like, "Check this out. Remember 1942, the arcade game? MAME
yeah,
ROMs, baby." And I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh!" Like my dad got me into all this crap.
Yeah, and MAME's really cool as well. Like, I know there's a lot of people trying to keep that dream alive. MAME cabinets are huge.
Oh, they're so good.
Retron is huge. Um, the guy that makes the
Raspberry,
Raspberry Pi arcade.
yeah,
Um, I can't think of the name of it, but it
I
again,
have it on my
yeah.
Raspberry Pi. I don't remember what the fuck it's called.
Um, RetroPie.
Yes, yeah, there it is.
um, those guys are like really keeping that dream alive. And we have companies like mostly Nintendo, if we're being honest. Nintendo is not a big fan of anything that doesn't make them money, as we've seen with them shutting down Melee tournaments. And, they're not a big fan. Okay, I'm going to sidetrack and I'm going to come back because it does connect. I
All right.
promise you. So this past summer, there was a tournament that was supposed to happen called the Big House. It's like the biggest Super Smash Bros. Tournament in North America. Because of COVID, it can only be played online. Online, they use a program called Slippy, which is a download for Dolphin, which is a GameCube emulator. And because they were using Slippy, Nintendo stepped in and was like, "No, we're shutting it down. You guys can't give it any prizes. You guys can't play our game on stream. We will come after you with the full force of lawyers if you guys try and do this, for trying to give exposure to our video game, because they're using a third-party program to play it." It was so disgraceful by Nintendo.
Yeah,
Was
that
this
was
the
bad.
new one? Like the new Smash?
No, it was
this was
Melee.
Smash Melee. Like,
Okay, so that's the other thing that I found to be an issue, is that they're not making money off of something that they're not making the game anymore. So
Yes.
like the whole thing with ROMs to me was it gave me access to like majority of Nathan Here's collection, where stuff that you can't get.
That's absolutely it. Like I have, and again, I was very lucky in the ability that my town has a retro video game shop, and that I was working jobs where I could afford to buy these games.
yeah.
But your average guy doesn't want to spend the money to go buy Mega Man X3, but he enjoyed playing it. How is he supposed to do that? I mean, Capcom's got you covered there because they release a Mega Man X collection every like 5 years. So you're good. It's on something that you own, I'm sure. It's on PC now, literally. So Capcom's got you covered. But say they didn't. Like, what are you supposed to do? Say it's some other game. I don't know, off the top of my head, Packy and Marlin. No one really wants to play it. No one really wants to play it. But if I'm like, yo, I speedrun Packy and Marlin, and it's like, okay, and then people are like, I want to speedrun Packy and Marlin too. How are they supposed to do that? It's not, like I said, it's not a great game, but are they, again, expected to go and find an $80 game that I've seen once in my entire fucking life and then get a SNES console too? No. It's ridiculous. And it does come down to Nintendo kind of being like, well, that's, our product and you should be paying us for it. And I get that, but
Yeah.
man, the Super Nintendo's what, like
Well,
30 years old at this point?
Yeah, it's
So I don't know, man. 20
yes.
more years and at least everything enters public domain for SNES, basically.
True.
Or does it?
1990.
Just hold out, guys.
If they don't re-up their contract.
Right.
So it's been 31 years that the SNES released.
Yeah.
That's like, that's 3 years younger than me. So 2 years younger than me. So to not be able to like having that monopoly and shutting down websites like, and I don't want to really draw attention to them, but like
No.
Emu Paradise, and which again doesn't exist anymore because Nintendo came in with their big Nintendo dick and was like, no, you cannot give people the ability to have access to these games. We're shutting you down. And there was like 8 or 10 big emulation sites like that Nintendo came through and just like called them all. So
Yeah.
now it's a lot harder to find a trusted website or trusted place to get these games without actually going to somebody who owns them and being like, hey, can I get a copy of this ROM?
Yeah.
I have people all the time. I have a copy of Japanese Super Mario 64 that I ripped myself. I have people ask me all the time, hey, can I get your Japanese copy of Super Mario so that I can have a ROM so I can speed run with it? It's like,
And you say no.
and I say no. Again, it's just the information sharing that has been, I don't look at emulation in a bad way. It's a great way to preserve the memories of these older consoles and games that like a lot of people would never have access to. Our kids, unless they grow up with some parent like me or Nathan who have held onto their consoles since they were a child, will not have access to that.
No,
They
and
won't.
sorry. That's something I wanted to get into too. Is like
Yeah.
there's a preservation aspect to it too. It's not just, I want to steal this. It's like, there's a limited number of these games out there.
Yeah.
Especially since everything was physical, through the 90s and even into the 2000s before everything started going digital. There's basically only physical copies of a lot of these games. So you start getting rid of all these emulation sites that are at, I mean, they may be giving these away for free, which is fine, but, they're also doing a good thing preserving, history, as it were. Because, I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but physical stuff tends to break down after time.
Yep.
And I am genuinely worried that, I don't think it'll be too much in my lifetime. They should hold out, but that some of my cartridges will just stop working.
Well, of course, like save batteries fail. Chips honestly fail. It's proven. Computer chips fail every single day.
Yeah.
Capacitors are not trustworthy ever. And if a capacitor pops on a Super Nintendo and spills its guts on top of your board, have fun trying to clean that and fix your traces to a point that it actually works again.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's like, whether you look at it from the moral of we're not, the company's not making money, you don't own the rights, there's still, in my opinion, the biggest thing is, the preservation. It's so important, especially maybe it wasn't, in the 90s because the gamer culture wasn't what it is now. But you talk to most people on the street, our age, a little bit older or younger, they play something, right? Like, what's up, Phoenix? They play some sort of video game.
Yep.
And they have memories of, oh yeah, I used to play Mario and Duck Hunt on my NES. Stuff like that. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. But now you can't play that anymore.
No,
Sorry.
and it's just like if you don't like, well, even Duck Hunt now, because of our TVs, unless you own a CRT TV, which hasn't been in production for the last 10 years,
yeah,
you can't use a light gun because it doesn't work.
Yeah, I have a SNES Super Scope. I have a NES light gun. I have Dreamcast light guns. All fucking useless.
Yep. Unless you have a CRT TV, they do not work. And
yeah, man.
At that point, they're just a collector's item. And whereas if you own that game on emulation, wow, look at that. I can play the game without...
I can use a mouse.
Yeah, I can use a mouse. Like,
Dreamcast keyboard for typing of the dead? Yeah, I do.
I don't, but
Bitch.
I'm not surprised that you do. Do you have the
All right.
online hookup?
What do the companies benefit from this, though? New challenger appears. Sorry.
There's inserting himself. I don't. You know, what do companies gain from it? At this point, not much.
yeah.
But what are they gaining from it as it stands? You know, a game that's 30 years old. If the company, say, isn't in business anymore, and they aren't making remakes of it or anything like that, what is the company getting out of it anyway? Nothing.
It's a dead, lots of dead IPs.
Yeah, and what does Nintendo get out of a pawn shop or a thrift store selling a SNES cartridge? Nothing. They've already got their money up front. It's not like it's a game as a service anymore. I went into a pawn shop, I found Super Mario Bros. 3 for $5 and I bought it. That goes to the pawn shop, or that goes to Goodwill, wherever I bought it, right? Like, Nintendo's not getting anything out of this anymore as it stands.
That's why they're making such a big deal about it in the end. For the handful of people, that is just enough people to sue the hell out of them, but not enough people to make ports of this on modern systems.
It's pretty much, it comes down to that they don't want to invest the money into trying to. They have stopped caring about this old dead technology, quote unquote, in their opinion. That they don't care in remaking or preserving those games. They only care from stopping other people to do the same thing. And then we get into reproduction copies.
Right, which and I brought some here. Mine are actually all Japanese reproduction copies, though, that were fan translated. Except for this one. This is the one with the lockout chip. This is Chrono Trigger Crimson Echoes, and it's like a fan made Chrono Trigger sequel. So it uses all the assets of the original, and it's got like its own unique story. I haven't played it yet, because I have to play it on my Super Nintendo. I could go get the ROM. I'm sure it's out there. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I thought it was really cool. And since we never got like a real sequel to Chrono Trigger, we got Chrono Cross and Radical Dreamers, which is the prequel to Chrono Cross, but it's like a novel on Super Nintendo.
And was only released in Japan, and we got nothing of it in North America.
Exactly. We didn't get this, but someone went through, fan translated it, and slapped it in a goddamn cartridge for me.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then we got Secret of Mana 2. We didn't get that over here.
Yeah, Seiken Densetsu 2.
Yeah, and so fan translated. Clock Tower, like one of the first horror games, and I think the only one on Super Nintendo. Like, that's a real horror game, and it is spooky. Fan translated again, right here, physical copy. And then Sailor Moon, another story, which is a great RPG. But we didn't get it, despite Sailor Moon being like really big over here in the 90s. And then, sorry, I got one more. I got a box copy of Mega Man and Bass. Again, fan translated.
That's really cool, actually.
Yeah, if fan translated, it's super great, but it's a ROM. It's slapped into a cartridge, and then someone put it in a box.
So to explain a reproduction copy, real quick.
Yeah.
Before we get too far off on it. So you know how I was talking about how those games have, 3 chips on them, which is like the RAM chip, the ROM chip, and then the actual graphics chip on those on the cartridge. So what you can do is you can actually buy cartridges or just boards that have those 3 chips on them, but the ROM chip is empty. So guys take those ROM chips, put them into their shell, they make a label for them all themselves, and they print or copy the game onto the ROM chip. Thank you. They copy the game onto the ROM chip so that they can put, fan-made games or copies of games that are hard to get so that you can sell a reproduction copy of Chrono Trigger for $25 instead of so an at cost copy. Again, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that they're selling these games as, they're not quote unquote legitimate copies of the games.
Yes.
They're not a Nintendo produced product. There's somebody taking a ROM, putting it on a ROM chip, and then making it available so that you can actually play it on original hardware. There you go. Yep.
I just like to pull things apart. No, I don't agree with people selling it, especially I get that they're mostly selling for their hard work.
Yeah.
I've noticed that there are some sneaky sellers who will try and pass it off as real and just that they're selling it lower. But for the most part, on like eBay listings I've seen, when I'm looking for rare games on eBay to see if anyone just happens to have it for cheap, they will put in the title reproduction cartridge.
Yep. Where do ROM hacks like all the Super Mario World hacks made with programs like Lunar Magic fall under, since Mario is still a valid Nintendo property? I, again, don't disagree with that. I think ROM hacks, as long as it's transformative, as we've seen with YouTube videos and all these other things, where transformative content is not theft. You're using the IP, as everyone loves Mario, this fucking little red plumber from the 1985 or 86 or whatever, when he got his own game, taking that little red plumber and making a game, usually using some assets that are home created and some assets from Nintendo, and making their own game with new storylines, all these developments. And then usually, I haven't really ever seen a ROM like a homemade hack or a homemade ROM hack cost any money. It's usually offered to people for free because they want people to just enjoy this game that they made. That's usually, I've played some ROM hacks that are better than the original games.
Yeah. No, and that's where it is too. Like if someone makes, like you said, transformative creation off of it, he's the worst fucking plumber you've ever seen. I mean, he is.
True.
They make these ROM hacks, a lot of them, like Grand Poo World and shit like that. And all the ROMs, as far as I know, are all offered for free. This Chrono Trigger, I paid maybe $20 for it, and that's only because it's a physical copy. So the work that went into making the cartridge, the label, and everything, that's what I paid for, not the ROM itself, because I can go get the fan ROM for free.
Yeah.
And that's I'm sure some people will be like, well, you shouldn't be charging for that. And it's like, but these shells, I'm sure most people pressed these. Like you can buy empty shells for Super Nintendo for cheap online.
They're probably either pressed or 3D printed or something
exactly.
along that.
So someone put the work into recreating what a Super Nintendo cartridge looks like, slapping some labels on it that are homemade, and then putting in the chip and loading up a ROM and making sure everything works. Especially this one, because it's got a lockout bypass on it.
Yeah.
Built into it.
Yeah, and that's another thing.
I didn't know.
People forget, so the Super Nintendo's lockout is really funny because technically it's just a screw on the main board. And you can technically go in and just desolder the lockout chip. It's like pin 4 on one of the chips. I'm not going to give you exact details. If you really want to find out, there's a ton of stuff on YouTube on how to make your console region free. If you want to find out, the information is out there.
The other thing I saw in there too was with Baker, how he's really just wants a fucking Jet Set Radio remake. Do you think they avoid having this crap out there so that people like him shut the hell up and leave him alone? And don't put the pressure on, so when they decide to dust off an old IP, it hits better, and they're not pressured like Half-Life 3?
Yeah. Well, let's just be honest, Valve is scared of anything with the number 3 in it. I don't know. It's hard to say whether they avoid it because they're scared of backlash or scared of being pressured to do things like that, or if they just avoid it because they want to move on and want people to look at their new stuff more than their old stuff. It's hard to say.
It's probably a company by company basis too, right? Like there's also people, you're saying, hey, we're remaking X game, and it's like, oh man, like, can you live up to the hype too, is part of it, right? And then your company is looking like who's CD Projekt Red.
Yeah.
Right? And that's definitely, I think, part of it for a lot of them is that there's so much hype built up around some game that people want a remake of. It's like, can we ever live up to that?
Yeah. Or, like a certain Reforged game.
I don't know what you could be talking about.
Let's hope the Diablo 2 one is better.
Look, Diablo 2 is going to be awesome.
I can only hope, and I try not to get excited about it because
it's too late, man. I'm there. I'm gonna be
that's
real
where
upset
I'm at
if
as
it
well.
Sucks.
But
I'm gonna be upset if it sucks. I know it.
Me too.
But I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, Diablo 2. Ugh.
All right, so at the moment, you guys are good with regular ROMs. You're fine with repro so long as they're being legit and upfront about it, and you're fine with paying for essentially the materials and like the minute labor the person put into making said repro.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy repros unless they're like changed from the original. Like all my games are, all my actual Super Nintendo games are authentic.
Yeah,
but,
I try not.
Like there's stuff you just can't get over here that never got. And as much as I can go and pop any of my Japanese games into my Super Nintendo because honestly, all you need to play Japanese games on your SNES is to snap off 2 little pegs in the slot and they'll play. Yeah, I can pop any of those in and that's great. I can play the Gundam fighting game. That's fucking sick. But I can't fucking read it. And is it worth my time to learn another language? To play a few games on my Super Nintendo? Probably not.
Not a
so
true fan.
I will go and look for a fan translation of it instead.
Yeah.
And most of the time they're out there. Like the ones I have are all very well done. And any typos, it's like, whatever, I don't really care that much about it. I know what's happening. That's what matters. So yeah, for the most part, I mean, it's just so hard to get your hands on so many things. Paying, the $20 for basically the Super Nintendo shell and the electronics board, to get a game of, a physical copy of a game you fucking loved. What? I don't know. I don't have a huge problem with it.
So, how do you feel about them hating all over that method, but then I've been seeing a big resurge in the nostalgia retro consoles that are like very small versions of like a Super Nintendo that's already got everything. It's essentially a retro Pi put into a shell, but it's done even poorly. How are they okay with that being sold in like Walmart?
Well, yeah, okay. How are they okay with that? The ones that are actually from Nintendo, clearly Nintendo is okay with it because they made it. Same with like the PlayStation Mini, but the one I've seen a lot is like there's been 5 or 6 Sega ones that I've seen come out, and I swear they aren't all from Sega. Like Sega can't be releasing the same little console every fucking 3 years, right? Like that can't be true.
Yeah, but right there, Phoenix pointed out all they'd have to do is somebody else is interested in pumping out a bunch of these shitty little retro players, and they're all of a sudden it's okay for them to do it. You just give them the permission and you take a cut off the top.
Yeah, now where does the license really fall though? So if I'm making a Raspberry Pi console and I'm like, I'm going to mass produce these and sell them. Cool. Great. Do I go to Nintendo to get all the permission for all the library there and say, hey, you'll get a cut? Or do I have to go to each publisher of the game? Like, where does the license really lie? Who has final say on who gets the money? Because though they all came out on Nintendo consoles, they were published by many different developers, right?
Yeah.
And publishers. And some of them are now defunct. So does having a ROM of that out there, does that give Nintendo the right to say, that was on our console, so we own the rights to it now? Or, since the publisher's defunct, is that just a free license? I don't know the law on that. I have no idea where that... Thanks for bringing up the Soldier Boy console.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, that's a really good example. Soldier Boy made that, like, basically just an emulator handheld thing, right? And I think he made a console too.
It was he bought licensing from some Japanese company that makes quote unquote fan games, but they're like the original game with like shitty additions. Like they're like those 601 consoles or whatever they are, like the ones that you can order for like $25 from Amazon.
Yeah.
And turned that into a console with his name on it and sold it for $250. And it was boy. They what a fucking disaster that was. And that's what shit like that is what makes emulation look bad. It's those companies that are like it's the non-transformative content. Like, let me take Super Mario Brothers 3 and in the first level change, 2 or 3 bricks and be like, we're gonna do that. That's good enough.
We changed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I wanted to add to what Dewdney said about making emulation look bad. All those like Emu Paradise and shit, and the defunct sites that have been shut down since then, they weren't making money off the ROMs. They were, I'm sure, for the most part, making money on the ads, which paid for the domain, man.
Yeah.
Like that, they were literally, as far as I could tell, scraping by just to keep it alive and keep the storage up, not for their own personal gain, not so that they could be like, haha, we're sticking it to the man. It's literally so that they could go, hey, remember those games you used to play? Play them.
You saw how bad they hit them for, right?
Yeah.
More than they'll make in a whole lifetime.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, it doesn't... It's hard to see that when I think someone's just trying to be the archivist.
Those sites were a minefield of advertisements. Absolutely. That's the only way that they made money. All those emulation sites, I don't look at it the same way as piracy. I don't look at emulation the same way as a piracy thing. I look at it as a preservation. It's those companies, and especially lots of these guys, like I know there's still sites in existence where you can download these games. I will not tell anyone where they are. I will not mention any names of how to find them. But they are still out there. They do still exist. And every one of those sites talks about how they're not in it for the money. They're not out to try and rip anybody off. They're in it because they love these games and they want people to have the ability to still play these games. No.
One other thing, I don't know if you guys are talking about in the beginning or if it was just before. You're talking about waiting for the copyrights or whatever to end?
Yeah.
Now, the issue with that is, like a lot of those run 120 years, right?
Well, I guess it depends what was filed, right?
Yeah.
But they do that, and then you look at, like, Disney. Disney had the same thing where they were about to lose the mouse. And then they, did their thing and extended it out to the point where, people weren't going to be alive enough to do that. So...
Yeah. No, like, and that's a worry too. And yeah, Iskel, support for ROMs. They no longer make these old games, and you could argue, Nintendo will release a Mario collection every once in a while, or on their virtual versions of the console, they'll put their Mario games. Fine. And Capcom's also very good about preserving their old games. They like to release, like Mega Man especially. They've released 3 Mega Man collections in the past 5 years, right? You can get it on anything at this point. But there's a lot of games in my collection that have never seen remakes, that will never see remakes.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, Dewdney, FF4 got remade on PS1 and PSP. The PSP version is the definitive way to play it. Just to put that out there, so good on PSP.
Absolutely.
I didn't even think about that. When they do actually port these over, how many of them end up shit?
Yeah, and we touched on that early. Like, Final Fantasy IV on DS was just it wasn't the same game.
No.
And
It's-
it wasn't. I played through it. It wasn't bad, but it was like it wasn't as good as playing it like actual Final Fantasy IV.
There's a lot of games like that where they took these really great games. So, okay, I need to grab something from the other room quick. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Okay.
It's a PSP game, and I need to
So, I mean, the thing
need to
that
get it.
really sucks about a lot of this is when did the Super Nintendo come out?
91.
Yeah, so when I was born. So I have
You're right.
faint memories of Mario Paint with the mouse and shit.
Okay,
Hell yeah. It's one of those that, like,
we're back.
I don't know. I think my
Right.
mom got rid of all that shit.
Right, but how many people's SNES mouse works even? Mine works.
Mine
but
did.
just fucking barely.
No, mine still
Like-
did.
Those
Mine
things were
don't.
not built to last, man.
Mine does not. I still have it, but I have the board too, because like the mouse pad, which was hard plastic and really good for hitting other people in the face with, BTW.
Did the Dracula X Chronicles have Dracula X on it?
No, it's only got Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night.
How the
Huh.
hell do you call it that then?
Right?
Huh. So how do you play Dracula X nowadays?
I think the only way is to have an old copy for Super Nintendo.
There it is. See?
Yep.
And that's not a cheap fucking game. And Konami's
No.
just like, oh wait, no. The Castlevania collection, I think, has it.
They did 2 more releases of it. They did it for the Wii U Virtual Console and the 3DS Virtual Console. Wii Virtual Console doesn't exist anymore. And if you didn't download the game while it existed, you shit out of luck. 3DS store, like the Virtual Console on 3DS, that store doesn't exist anymore. So
Yep.
So now what happens in that case? Like, think about 360. 360's fairly phased out now. How many of those games could you download and play off your hard drive? Now, what happens when something in that doesn't work? Your whole downloading and using it there, is that going to be any different than ROM usage?
That's
Yeah.
that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because we technically did buy the licenses to these games, and theoretically, and PlayStation tried to do this recently by shutting down the PSP store and the Vita store.
I don't know why it's so important to keep the PS3 store up. Well, if you just look at this price right here and compare it to these prices right here, you might just fucking understand.
But then there was this big backlash of, hey, we all bought games on your fucking PlayStation, like on your store. We have the rights to download them forever. We don't have to download them and store them anywhere. We have the right to go and get this whenever we want. So it's I believe PlayStation has gone back on shutting down those stores anytime soon.
Yeah.
Because of people being like, you can't. And
the
it's
same-
interesting that Nintendo got away with shutting them down, especially when they didn't migrate it over to the Wii U or Switch.
technically, with those old games that you are downloading on the PS3, especially for like, you know, a PS1 or PS2 game on your PS3, unless you have a fat PS3, you are emulating that game. You are using an ISO file to make that game work on your PlayStation.
Yeah, but remember
Yep.
the services thing they
Thanks for
did
the
with
follow.
PS4 where they bought up a bunch of cloud servers so that they could do emulated streaming so that they didn't have to worry about the console being very heavy in hardware?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's great. But it's still emulation, man.
Also requires
So,
internet
Some
and
company,
subscription.
I mean, look at it this way: the Switch has like when you subscribe, you get like the NES console and the SNES console, and they constantly release new games for them. What is that but emulation of the old hardware and games? Like, it's now Nintendo taking advantage of that technology and making money off of it. Which, I get it, but you're never gonna get all the games that we used to play. They're putting the expensive ones on there. You're getting Metroid, you know, Yoshi's Island, shit like that. But you're not gonna get your Packy and Marlin or your fucking, you know, Super Putty.
Yeah.
Those,
Is this-
you're never gonna see those.
Okay, but is this happening now? The same reason we're bitching? Like, they can't just throw stuff up because they then have to share some of that money or get permissions or figure out how to go ahead and give that money? Or are they just being assholes because they don't want to waste server space for this Packy and Marlin game you keep bringing up?
Listen,
that like
Packy and
five
Marlin's
people,
fucking banger.
5 people,
Not a banger.
and you're not even
Fucking
supposed to
sucks.
use it as like therapeutic
Listen,
advice.
Don't
all right?
use it. Okay, yeah. See, Phoenix knows. He's like,
Yeah,
Jason's
so
gonna go off on
we're-
this one.
So not only are we not lawyers, but not doctors. Got it.
We're not lawyers and/or doctors. Okay.
Do not
Like,
take legal
and that-
advice or
that's the
medical
issue, though,
advice.
right? Like, Nintendo can go in and they can pull their games and they can put them up freely because they're the ones making money off of it, and it goes to no one else. But and I would actually, I'm trying to think, is there any? No, there is DKC and shit are on there, so they must. Oh, but Nintendo has a deal with Microsoft now, so who owns Rare, but Nintendo owns Donkey Kong. So where does that lie? It's a whole fucking gray area, and it's just Nintendo being assholes.
How much data space would it actually take them for all of their old games? I mean, the SNES would be less than 100 gigs. A SNES game is generally, if we're talking honestly, it's about 75 megabytes for a ROM file.
Yeah, but I meant more like the having to have the server holding it, the bandwidth, the upkeep,
Listen,
I know
cloud-
it's either.
Dude, cloud servers are so fucking cheap to set up nowadays. Like, it's so cheap. If Nintendo really wanted to, they could do it. They could integrate it into their Nintendo, Super Nintendo Online platform, and it's just like, what game do you want? And then it doesn't go directly to your thing. You go through the list and you're like, oh, I'm going to download that one today. Puts it on your console, and then you're like, oh, I don't have the space for this other one. I'm going to delete that ROM and download a different one. They could do that. And fuck me dead if I wouldn't pay for that.
Yeah,
right?
but
If
all right,
Nintendo
so
were to just set up pay us for this service, download the old games. Oh, you want to go a little bit beyond that? You want N64 added in there? That's an extra $2 a month. Fuck it. Take my money, Nintendo.
you're talking subscriptions then.
I already subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online. We're getting way off topic here, and it's past time.
No, this is perfect. This is like right into like we're now figuring out how would you do this if you were in charge of
Right.
Nintendo.
And Phoenix here, AW is 50 cents a day, depending on CPU and disc credits. Right. So it's not even that much. Nintendo could make 50 cents a day off of me for that kind of service.
So,
But you still
not a
have to
fucking
pay
word of
the
a lie.
people who made the games.
yes,
Somewhere in there, you have to figure that out.
the amount that it would cost for them to go to these old companies and pay for licensing as Nintendo and be like, look, we want to relicense these old IPs and resell them or reoffer them on a pay per month service the same way. How much? Okay, if we're being honest, how much do you pay for Netflix and Amazon Prime and fucking Hulu and everything else every month? Spotify Premium, all that shit. You're paying $75 a month in monthly charges, roughly, probably, in your like Twitch subscriptions, all that stuff. Like all that stuff is it's a monthly subscription payment. Would you not add on a $15 a month or $10 a month subscription to play these old emulated games? I absolutely would.
100%. And Iskel, I don't know if that's true or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what Nintendo did.
So
Pound into the dirt with thousands of connections collector would be about $500 a month tops. Nintendo could make that easy.
could this be something that's in the works and it just takes forever because of law stuff? I mean, think about it. Did they not get the ability to seize the servers from the emulation site, thus giving them all of the ROM files?
Everything they need.
You know, kind of like, you know, a couple other companies we know that do that. That here we go, we take this, and now we make money, and we didn't have to go through all the, you know, legwork.
I mean,
cough, Blizzard, cough, Riot Games.
yeah, it might not be. It might be in Nintendo's plan, and they could be trying to get you know, and I don't know what their plan is with their, you know, SNES console on the Switch, like the downloadable one that you get with your subscription. But if they were to up the subscription fee and be like, look, we're giving you access to all these NES ROMs, all these SNES ROMs, we're adding N64 slowly, I'd be like, cool, you can up the sub fee for that, man. I will pay you $50 a year, $60 a year, $80 a year for that. I would go probably up to $100 a year for a subscription where they're like, yep, we're throwing in GameCube now. And then every few generations on, it's like, oh, here's your Wii games. Oh, here's your Wii U games. You know, and in like 20 years, they're like, here's your Switch games. I'm like, fucking sick. I would pay for that. That is something that if Nintendo, and I think Nintendo sometimes gets caught in and I've heard there is like an old Japanese way of doing business, and that's not it. The way we're thinking. And I think there's still some older people here who are like, that's not what we should do. And I don't know if that's true or not, but Nintendo being a Japanese company, it could be that they're not fully on board with doing that yet. But I think that would be optimal. And again, I don't think I'd be the only person who would be willing to pay for that.
And we gotta wrap it up soon. Nathan's got back alley SNES deals to do.
Yeah.
I tell people my business.
You gotta go suck dick for that Chrono Trigger money, you know?
I don't need that Chrono Trigger money, baby. I got the Chrono Trigger money. Anyway, where I want to land on this is I think emulation is great, especially as a preservation.
Yes.
And I think if Nintendo was smart, and I think even if other companies were smart, and PlayStation was starting to do it too, they were releasing a lot of the old PlayStation games as available for download, right? They were doing it, and then they went to PS4, and they're like, no, that's gone. No one liked that. Fucking everyone liked that!
Yeah, it's the same thing. Well, it's the same thing with the Wii Virtual Console and the Wii U and stuff. A lot of Super Nintendo games were available on those stores that we haven't seen available to us again since then.
Mm-hmm. It's release the same game for competing console until 2 years had passed. Nintendo would decide how many cartridges be supplied to the licensee. Nintendo would decide how much space would be dedicated, such as article. Interesting.
So it really is Nintendo that makes the decision.
Yeah.
So all the licensing comes to Nintendo.
They have no reason not to be doing it, is what I'm hearing here.
Yeah.
So if Nintendo's listening, Doug Bowser, you fucking listening, buddy? Get your shit together.
Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yeah, but what about the chip shortage? I mean, how are we supposed to play them if they can't make them? I mean, like, it'd be cool if I could just download it and play it on my computer.
Wouldn't it?
Right?
Hey, what if it was an
Nintendo.
online service and you just had to go to a web
here we
browser
go again.
and it let you hook up a controller to your PC and then you could go through and play all these Nintendo games. And then, oh, what's that? I got a Switch too? Oh, now I can play it on my Switch as well when I'm on the go? Holy fuck, Nintendo. I'm giving you ideas.
So retro games should have been a hashtag trending thing, kind of like D&D was, and look at how much new shit D&D Wizards have been shitting out because that made a resurge. Obviously, that needed to be the thing that was going on when the pandemic started, or during the pandemic, to have gotten this type of traction. So we dropped the ball, guys.
The start of the
happens.
pandemic, and this is just sample size. Super Mario 64. Look at how big, because of Twitch, speedrunning in Super Mario 64 got in the last 2 years during the pandemic. And how many people have downloaded Project 64 and that singular ROM to play fucking Super Mario 64, a 20-year-old game that nobody gives a shit about, that you just released again on the Switch, and nobody wants to fucking play it on the Switch.
Yeah, but didn't they fix the things?
Well, yeah, that's
People
because
don't want it fixed.
Yeah, they didn't give us the version that they wanted. They gave us the Japanese version that doesn't have BLJs. Suck my dick, Nintendo.
It's part of their deal. They protect the game's clones and pirates out of their own pocket. Interesting. Because they own the rights, so they have to protect the people they get the rights from. Okay, that's interesting, but I mean, they aren't making money from the games anymore anyway, so
No.
we got off topic. The speedrunning is for another day as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think that was
speedrunning
going to
is
be
another
today's
day.
topic, but
Yeah.
it
Yes.
fell through. So maybe next week. And that's the thing. And a lot of people aren't comfortable with, emulation and downloading shit like that. They are worried about the legal repercussions of it. So, and what would be $5 out of your pocket? Fuck it, man. I didn't go get a coffee today. Cool. I just bought SM64 to play on my PC.
What's the most you'd pay for it?
I mean, I wouldn't pay. I don't like the game, so I wouldn't pay. For
Yeah,
it.
but I'm talking about literally any of the other ones. If you
Oh.
were able to get it on your, instead of a subscription base, you paid
Uh-huh.
per game.
I
Would
don't
you
know.
pay
I
back to
think-
original prices again?
Probably not. I don't think I
no.
would play AAA prices for a 30-year-old game.
No, not
But-
AAA. Because think about it, games have gone up in value now. I'm talking about back when they originally released, when they were what,
Like-
$30, maybe
30
more.
to
30
50.
30 to 50 I'd be comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I'd
Yeah.
want to go lower because I'm not getting the physical version of it. Like if it's a
Mhm.
digital to play on my PC, I would want to go lower. But I would be totally cool with paying original prices for physical copies of those games.
We are going to have to wrap it up. Nathan has, like we said, he has back alley appointments.
Hey.
It's 45 minutes. So we are going to end this for now, guys. It was an interesting episode for sure. I mean, I feel like, again, I have more to say about what we were talking about.
And
but,
I could rant for hours on this shit.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe there'll be a part 2 later.
And then we get a fucking... anyway, I'm getting off topic again. Because
Yeah.
I get off topic and then I get off topic.
Yeah.
I'm Nathan, and this has been a podcast.
Yes. Emulation is good, in my opinion. Good things.
Agreed.
Good things.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
guys. Have a wonderful night.
Or don't. That's up to you. Yeah, man, fuck. I could have gone on for hours about how Nintendo could do a better job.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know how their infrastructure works. I don't. But they already have a way to pump games out to the fucking Switch console in a nice little package. It's literally called. What is this thing called? It's called the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah, it's like an emulation built right into the fucking
Nintendo
Switch.
Switch. Yeah, so it's